This is video 3 in the CISC 133 series, LAN switching and wireless. In this video we'll focus on port security. This video will talk about how we can prevent the bad guys from getting connectivity to our switch. In our previous video we looked at telnet specifically and how to cover our telnet connections using a username and password, and then monitoring those. In this video we'll be looking specifically at line con 0, our console port, and the 24 ports, physical ports, that are on our switch. So let's start by giving our computer console connectivity to the switch. Now the console port is a very well trusted port because you have to physically be connected or local with the device. So there's really, by default, nothing stopping anybody from getting into our switch. So all I have to do is connect my rollover cable to the console port and hit enter, and I'm right in. Notice there's no one stopping me from getting to enable mode or config T. If I do a show run, I can see all the ports that are actually on my switch. So here's the first port here, interface FA01, that goes up to FA024. So I have 24 fast Ethernet ports. I have a logical VLAN 1 port, which doesn't actually have a physical presence on the switch, but the line con 0 does. So we need to make sure that not just anybody can get to that. You may notice that the switch does not have an aux port, unlike the router, and I'm not real sure why that is, other than switches are usually locally connected, so you may not necessarily have to get to it remotely, and if you did have to get to a switch remotely, the console port can be connected to a modem as well. So let's focus on the console port for right now. As I said before, once you physically can get to the console port and get connected, you have all the rights and permissions to get into the router. So we're probably going to want to prevent someone from being able to do that. So if I type in line con 0 and I force a login and I set a password, that should force someone into giving us a password. There we go. So now when I connect using my console connection, I have to put in a password. But notice there's nothing stopping me from getting to enable mode or into config mode. Before we do that though, I wanted to show you something about telnetting in without an enabled password. In our previous video we configured the switches for telnet. So notice I can get in, it asks me for a username, but once I actually try to configure the switch, I can't because there's no enable secret. We can resolve that by putting in an enable secret password. Now when I do a show run, there's my enable secret, and when I try to telnet, oops, one more time. Alright, try that again. You have to be able to type in order to do these videos. Now when I type enable, asks me for a password. I now can get in. Now I can get in config mode here from Telnet as well. So as a reminder, if you are allowing people to Telnet into your devices, you really have to put in an enable secret in order for them to be able to do anything, which is not true for the console port. Remember, with the console port, we were able to get right in and make all the changes we wanted. When we tried to Telnet in without an enable secret password, we couldn't change any settings on the switch. Now I'd like to move on to putting a stop on the physical interfaces themselves. So if no one is using port FA01 or FA02 or FA03, now in this case they are, but no one's using 4 through 24, I'm probably going to want to shut those ports down. So in order to shut those down, there's a real nice command, once I get into config T, called interface range. And if I reference FA04 through 24, tell it to shut, now they are all shut down. Now if I do a show run, all those ports are shut down. Now the 3 ports that are open, which would be 1 through 3, I'm going to put port security on those specific ports. The purpose of these commands are to prevent people who really should not be in our network from getting connected. So the first thing I have to tell the switch is that this port is a access port, meaning that this port will be connected to an end device. And now I turn on switch port security, so that's what that command does, switch port security. Now I want to tell the switch that we only want one MAC address connected to these ports. Then I'll tell it the sticky command, which says the switch port MAC address sticky command, which tells it if there's a MAC address in that port now, use that, or take the first one that will be connected and use that. But once we have that MAC address in the table, that's the only one we'll get. Now we have to tell it what to do if we do get more than one. So we'll say violation, shut down. So if I do a show MAC address table, we can see that we have one MAC address in FA03. So maybe if we send a little traffic here, we could populate that. Alright, now let's try that again. Okay, so now we see all 3 devices. Now if I were to take another computer and connect it to FA01, 02, or 03, we should see that port shut down. So I'll grab a user. We'll have to remove FA02. We'll connect that guy to FA02. We'll give him an IP address. So he's going to come in here and pretend that he's now somebody on that network. And we'll try to send some traffic. There we go. It immediately gets shut down. Now I can look at that on the switch by looking at show port security, and I can see that we have one security violation on FA02. Notice they're all set for shutdown, but there's only one violation. So this should prevent anybody from connecting to any of these ports and keep them off our network. So that's the end of this video. In summary, we made sure that not just anyone could get into our LineCon 0, and we put port security on the FA0 through 3, and we shut down everything else. So now our switch is relatively secure.